Do you ever find yourself getting in one relationship after the other and feel like it's just a same relationship, different warm body? This happens a lot, and it's because of the dynamics that we build. So stay tuned and learn what your dynamic says about you. Hi, I'm Jennifer Evans with Empowering Wellness Counseling Solutions, and today we're talking about relationship dynamics. As we get into relationships, and I have a whole image of all the things that happen when we get into a negative cycle. But a part of that is what causes our half of the dynamic of a relationship. So many times people will say, yeah, man, he was such a loser, or man, she was bat crazy. I cannot believe I ever dated them. But what we find is well, but the girlfriend before that, and the boyfriend before that, and the partner before that, and the partner before that, all had similar characteristics. One, they all dated you. And two, what we find is you can't sit there and say that you were with somebody who wasn't enough. And instead you have to understand and own that you own 100% of your half of the dynamic of that relationship. And so whatever transpired between you, you have to own your half. You have to own your half. It is what it is. It is your half, and you may feel as if you had a lot of reactionary parts within the dynamic. You may feel that you were constantly trying to force the other person to be a part of the relationship. But I guarantee you that no matter what happened, it all happened because of your half. And how you address people, what your insecurities are, what your past traumas are, what your attachment is like, all has to do with your half of the dynamic and how you will respond to somebody else and how they will then respond to you. It's all about response. And in my newest book, we're actually getting into, I have a couples relationship success group. I'm really excited to start. And then I have my young professional success group where we've already gone through the framework, building a framework for success. We've gone through and understood what emotional resiliency is and how do we build that so we can have success. And now we're getting into our third and final key step to success, which is interpersonal skills. And as a part of that group, we're going to do a deep dive into all of the things that create interactions between two people. The negative cycles, interpersonal skills, the simple kind of anagrams of dialectical behavior therapy of how do you negotiate your value and how do you talk to others and feel seen and heard and make others feel seen and heard. How do you build meaningful networks and meaningful relationships? What does it look like when I say that behavior is predictable? What does that mean? It all feeds in together of this dynamic. And at the very end, when we've learned everything we need to know about human interactions, we're going to build, I'm so excited, an empathy algorithm. So we're gonna learn why empathy isn't rampant. We're gonna learn that there's a lot of emotional shutting down when we have trauma. Remember, after COVID, technically we all have trauma brains. Everybody who lived through COVID has trauma brain, which means that their emotional part of their brain is not necessarily as accessible as it was prior to COVID. It means that that emotional brain is now becoming a survival mechanism and no longer being able to process emotions in a rational format. That is what trauma brain is. And so we're going to find an algorithm that no matter where our stress is, no matter what our emotions are, we're going to be able to effectively handle and manage our emotions and be emotionally available for others If you've ever heard, and man, is it like candy to women, he's emotionally unavailable. Carrie Bradshaw loved herself an emotionally unavailable man. Big was as emotionally unavailable as it came. And it was moth to a flame for her. And there are so many women out there who can relate to Carrie Bradshaw's story, because there's safety and there's risk and there's excitement all within this emotional unavailability. But when you're trying to build a strong relationship and a meaningful relationship with someone, it's not fun anymore to have these emotional unavailabilities there. And so building that empathy algorithm allows that emotionally unavailable man to find some emotional availability. It's a really exciting time. And I highly recommend you reaching out, putting a comment in, DMing me, and getting more information. If you have a partner who is wanting to build, or you're wanting them to build more emotional availability for you, to not anxiously get into just solving these problems, but feeling like you two are a team again. And all of this is related back to our dynamics, how we own our half of the dynamic, how we learn what our half of the dynamic is we have to understand the broader picture of what our emotional reactions are, how that negative cycle is going off. And remember, the negative cycle is emotional reactions, cognitive distortions, or invalid data points feeds attachment. When we are in a stress state, we are not in a secure attached state. We are either anxiously attached, we fear abandonment, avoidantly attached, we fear commitment or obligation, feeling like a burden. Ugh. There's a third one, disorganized attachment, and that means that you equitably fear being alone and fear being with somebody at the same exact time. And that usually comes from people who grow up in households where there's some kind of access to happening. Access to is on, it's a clinical diagnosis that says you either have something of clinical consideration, but not necessarily treatable. Substance abuse used to be on there. It's now Access 1. Substance abuse has a lot to do with disorganized attachment. Personality disorders has a lot to do with disorganized attachment. So it's not super common, but it's becoming more and more common. And there's a lot of people who find it difficult to navigate relationships because of disorganized attachment. They either overly get into as many relationships as possible, or they're like, I don't even know what to do. I know I don't want to be alone, but I know I don't want what I've seen in my life. So where do I go from here? That attachment then builds into a negative narrative. What do we get out of? Like, what is the narrative? What is the script we've told ourselves as to the high stress events in our lives? That's the negative narrative. That negative narrative immediately starts drawing on every single stressor we've ever had in our life. Remember, chronic stress and trauma are exactly encoded exactly the same way in the brain. And so all of that comes up. It creates a filter, a lens with how you are interacting with the world. That becomes a perceived reality, and you start invoicing people so that they start acting and reacting in the way in which you are perceiving the world. What does that sound like? Your half of the dynamic, other people's half of the dynamic. That's where it all starts to come from. In a stress state, are you shutting down and like make the world go away, avoidant attachment? And that's where you stop. Are you saying, man, I know this life is out of control and I've got to do something. I got to stir that pot. I am on the offense. Then you probably are creating a chaos in an effort to achieve perceived control. And as you're doing that, then you're building these perceived expectations. And these perceived expectations is not only anxiety, what I should and could be doing, but also suffering and despair. They could be doing more. Should be doing more. How many times have we said that about our partner? I don't understand. They could have done that. Well, they didn't know because you didn't tell them. But you thought you told them because you gave them clues and they were supposed to be a detective, not your partner. I get a lot. Well, you're a therapist, so that means you should be able to do this and you could be able to do that. Not if you don't pay me. I'm just a human being. I am just a human being. Do I have more knowledge? Yes. Will I give some nice little gems for free out there? 100%. But at the end of the day, I'm just a human being who's had my own experiences, who wants to have sometimes just crappy reactions and then be like, oh, that was a terrible decision. But I'm allowed to have that. If I want it, that's what I want, you know? Sometimes you just want to cry. Sometimes you just want to scream. Sometimes you just want to stir the pot because at least you're doing something. But those perceived expectations are the killer of joy and causes you to either shut down, avoid an attachment, or anger outbursts, right? And that's where that anger management comes in, is because you've repressed too long and that you can't repress any longer. Or what we see at the most extreme cases in borderline personality disorder, we have these really emotionally reactionary places, and that pulls you right back to emotional reactions and just keeps the cycle going. And that's what we're finding in those universal constructs right in the center. And all of it plays together on this negative dynamic. And when you can figure out where all your parts are on that negative dynamic, then you know what your half of the dynamic is. And so we explore your half of the dynamic in Key Steps to Live a Happier and Healthier Life Workbook Part 2, Emotional Regulation. We actually go through all of this. Suffering and gratitude on the same spectrum, emotional resiliency, invalidating environments. That really gave my group members great insight. And the people who have bought the workbook, they have given me feedback that really was their like aha moment. Like, oh, I didn't realize that when this was happening, I was being invalidating. So I felt like I had to work even harder, people pleasing. All of it coming together. And so you're learning all the different people, the perceived realities, a chapter in the book, trauma in the bad brain, chapter in the book, stress management, chapter in the book. So you go through all of these pieces, and that's going to help you find your half of the dynamic. And then what this new book is going to do, what these new groups are going to do with the interpersonal skills, is now that you know about you and your half of the dynamic, let's go see how it fits with other people and their half of the dynamic. How are you feeding? How are you using this to be defensive or protective, offensive or defensive? What are you doing to kind of keep these suffering going? And what are you doing to protect yourself and to heal yourself and to recover? Because remember, on the recovery spectrum, we are relapsing, healing, or recovering, and everything in between. And so sometimes we don't even realize how much we're healing and how much we're relapsing. I ask that if you like this, to please to share with somebody who may also want to know their half of the dynamic. Go into the comments and let me know what your half of the dynamic is if you want to actually get one of these chapters, you're not sure you want to commit to everything, let me know what really resonated with you. I'll send you that chapter for free. I'm happy to do that. So you can start exploring this for yourself. I've got a good relationship dynamic workbook that I'm going to put into the chapter or into the video description as well. And I ask that you subscribe so that you can get more valued information on how to make you a happier and healthier person who's living up to their potential. Thank you so much.